All right. Well, welcome to the Collaborative Approach in Education. My name's Tammy, and today we are joined by Dr. Red Ruby Scarlett. So, Dr. Red Ruby Scarlett is an early childhood educator, an artist, activist, and an academic for over 30 years. She's known for her work in inclusive practices, anti-bias approaches, and supporting educators to tell their own story. She's also written lots of key books and created songs for children. And my personal favourite is the National Quality Framework musical. But yeah, well, I just want to hand it over to you to just give us a little bit of background information and then we'll go from there.
Thank you so much for having me on your wonderful podcast. I love educators creating their own resources, as you know, I've been very committed to, and it's wonderful to be a guest on your podcast because you're running a service, aren't you?
Yes, yeah, that's correct.
So you're sort of resourcing people and running a service all at the same time, which I think is enormous amount of work, but absolutely wonderful. Good for early childhood people to take control of their own profession.
Yeah, and I think it's all about trying to get more quality out there. So it's, to get not just from a small, like what you're working with every day, but try and expand out your horizons. And I think a lot of educators are really wanting that and looking for that. So
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, well, I guess like we just want to start by asking you what first drew you to early childhood education and how did you come to focus on creative and inclusive practices?
Okay, so this is a fun story to tell. My mum is a primary school teacher.
Mhm.
My dad is a high school teacher. And I ended
Teaching's
up,
in your blood.
yeah, and then I ended up being an early childhood teacher and then working also in university. So we figured between our whole family, we've covered the whole education system. So yeah, I guess it was. I mean, I do have a lot of interests, and some of those are love interests that I've managed to bring into my profession, like musical theatre, creativity, working with arts, all of that kind of stuff. So it's kind of, yeah, I do have a lot of things going on, and it's quite fun when you can bring them all together to make your work something, your professional time, something that you really, really love. And
Mm.
I was lucky because, both of my grandmothers were really creative people. And I had a lot of input as a child because they kind of, looked after me while mum went to work. And yeah, I kind of got the best of both of these incredible women that I believe have shaped me to be the professional that I am today. With I'm very a curious person, and so anything that's going to pique my interest is always, yeah, I guess that's kind of how I understand creativity. So not necessarily just art,
Mhm.
creativity as a way of being,
Mhm.
as a person, that I'm curious about the world, and I've always had quite a wild imagination. Um, which has been fun. And I guess that's been early childhood is such a perfect place for
Mm.
people with marvelous imaginations because unlike the other part of the education profession, we do have a lot of space because we have play and we have
Mm.
inquiry-based learning and we have all these wonderful things about being curious and chasing ideas, etc., etc. So I think, yeah, the fit around who I am and my upbringing really dovetails nicely into creativity, imagination, and inclusion. Um, yeah, in my work. So I feel really, yeah, well placed.
Yeah, and I think like we see that a lot in the early childhood with educators that come through, and just that they're like when they're passionate about it, it really shows like from their upbringings and backgrounds, and sometimes like you like yourself, you've got like this like really strong background, and then you have the opposite where you have like these educators come through that didn't get that and they want to give it. So it's just this like a really incredible balance of all these different people and their walks of life and how they come together. And it's a beautiful thing to kind of be a part of, so that we can be there for different types of children and their own upbringings and backgrounds. And things like that. So,
And some, I mean, it's a beautiful thing to talk about because we love celebrating diversity and difference. The reality is that it can be like that and feel like that a lot of the time, but it can also be quite tricky. And
mm,
so I think that's why the inclusion conversation, and I say this with my special little air quotes, the inclusion conversation is one that it's not something you can tick off that you've done. It's constantly in process. Like
mhm,
ourselves, we're even though we're adults, we're still constantly becoming. We're still exploring our being in the world, and the world changes around us. We change with it. We respond to what's going on.
mhm.
And a large percentage of our profession, or people who make up our profession, have only been in the profession for 3 or 5 years. I can't remember. Lisa Bryant was telling me the statistics. I can't remember exactly what it was, but I know it was an enormous chunk of the profession. So there's a lot of new people who wouldn't have had access to what, the oldies,
Yeah.
like myself, have had access to and what we've seen. But then
Mm,
I was a young person in the profession 30 years ago. So
mm,
what about the people then who'd been there for 30 years,
mm,
and what I was coming into? So I always think about that intergenerational um, uh, connection, I suppose we all have, having been a young person coming in and now being where I am, and thinking, how am I just expecting people to do what I did 30 years ago, or
yeah.
do what I did 10 years ago, or whatever else, um, and not actually checking in and going, it's 2025.
Mm,
Who are these people? What is Gen Z and X and Y and millennial and da 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 da? And what are the things that have been critical um, to the the childhoods and the livelihoods of
mm,
those generations, which I think is fun because,
mm.
I didn't get a phone until I was in my 30s.
Yeah.
And a lot of young people are almost born with them.
Mm,
Babies know how to swipe, babies know how
yeah.
to navigate tablets and things like that. So there's this massive cultural shift in who educators are, and what
Mm.
young children can do these days.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I just had a meeting this morning with using our Kindy Uplift funding, and it was with a psychologist. And we're actually going to do a professional development with our educators on attachment and how, like your own attachments, how they affect others, and what you need to look in for, like not just your co-workers, your children and your families, but how does all that affect how you speak to children, how you speak to the parents, and where are your healthy boundaries and things like that. So, and like avoiding burnout. And so I just thought, I went to like an educational leader meeting and I met this woman and I just thought, oh, I just love what she's doing. And yeah, when we had this meeting, it was not how we were expecting it to go, in as what our goal was for the service. But yeah, after we sort of spoke on our team and just like what, like that, like she came up with her own, like tailored, like what she was hearing. And I was like, oh, that's so cool to hear. Because like we've done a lot on like different colors and, that people are like, what, with Alina Dan, I've done like what color emotions and things like that they are. And it was just interesting to be more like a much deeper level, and to really be reflecting on ourselves so that we can be inclusive and so that we can let go of inhibitions and not have that judgment to be creative and, more than just showing up every day. And yeah, like it's just, there's a lot more to it.
Mm.
So,
Well, I mean, phones are a perfect example because
mm,
if we lose our phone, we feel like we've lost our whole universe.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
this reliance on technology, there's no Wi-Fi, and suddenly we feel like we're the most isolated person on the planet. So the things that we've become accustomed to, and some
mm,
people, well, I've grown into those things. I didn't have them growing up, but they're children
yeah.
now, and a lot of educators have always had, that's been their whole what's
They don't know anything else. Yeah.
their world. And so it's understandable that you would have an attachment
Hmm.
to those kinds of
Technology. Yeah.
technology, and to be able to connect.
Yeah.
So because we talk about connection, we
Mm,
mostly in human relationships. um,
mm,
I mean, we do talk about connection with country as well, but the connection, how Wi-Fi gives us connection, we're doing it
mm.
now, really, aren't we?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that, yeah, even though technology seems like it's a far away thing,
Mm.
Donna Haraway reminds us that it is literally part of our being and our becoming. Mm.
Yeah, most definitely. Like I did a professional development at the start of the year, and it was all about technology and just like we've got this society that wants everything so fast paced that the connection is completely lost, and how like important it is in the early years. It is a skill that needs to be taught now. So getting like we've had a lot of these conversations recently about getting right back to basics. And those basics are, how do we connect? How do we make sure we nurture and that we are safe spaces, and all of those sorts of things. So it is really important. Hmm.
Absolutely.
I guess you often talk about dignity and integrity in teaching. What do those values look like, would you say, in everyday practice?
Integrity and dignity are two words that I don't hear a lot in the profession.
Mm.
And that concerns me because I think it's and it's tricky on many levels, but I think sometimes we feel the pressure of things like the National Quality Framework or assessment and
Mhm.
rating or the standards or something, and we think, oh, I've got to get this, I've got to get all this done, I've got to get these boxes ticked, I've got to change these babies' nappies, I've got to make sure I'm doing a progressive mealtime and all the babies are being fed and da da da. And in amongst that, you're madly ticking things off. In which case, your your presence is in a few different places. Now,
Mhm.
that's you can't only ever have your presence in one place. I think
Mhm.
the lovely thing to aspire to. It's not a reality though. But
Mm.
in your divided attentions or our divided attentions, sometimes, you know, if you pause and go, let's just think about what dignity looks like when where children are going to the toilet.
Mhm.
What does dignity look like when I'm changing a nappy?
Mhm.
How do we hold the integrity of our relationship with children that are there for care and education? What approaches, what is within our own being and in our relationality to that child or that moment or that place that upholds the child's dignity
Mhm.
and the integrity of what it means to change a nappy in an early childhood setting when you've got 20 nappies to change or
Mhm.
you've got something like that. And so the tension between feeling the pressure of ticking boxes and getting stuff right, and that is absolute, like I absolutely empathize. We have to be incredibly compassionate and empathetic around what those experiences look and feel like, but also then going, how are we resourcing? How are we creating our physical places and spaces in order that the dignity of the child is upheld and that
Mhm.
our practice is executed with integrity? And
Yeah.
so for me, I think that I know when I'm treated really well, I
Mhm.
learn better.
Mhm.
I know when I'm treated really well and I feel that my dignity and integrity are upheld, I teach better. I
Mhm.
do better professional development. I do better musicals. I do
Yeah.
better writing. I do better everything when
Mhm.
I have that sensibility. But if I have a tiny little bit of feeling unsafe
Mhm.
or, um, being a bit awkward or something like that, babies are often having their nappies change in public spaces,
Mhm.
cold winds blowing through on their little bodies. And, then we've got cold wipes and we're, touching the most personal parts of them. So how is that done with integrity and dignity? Respect
Mm.
is one thing, but I think honing down on, having a discussion, a whole staff meeting discussion about what does integrity and dignity look like. I'd love to see more of that.
Mm.
Because I think that that's where people go, and it is that, well, what if that was me and I was that
Mm.
be relying on somebody to care for me and uphold who I am in that moment reciprocally? How is that happening when it is sometimes really stressful? It is
Yeah.
sometimes a busy day. It is people are sick. It is, the conditions of the climate that we're in can sometimes make that really tricky. And so nobody can get it perfect all the time. But
Yeah.
least bringing it into, our awareness, our attunement to what's going on in that moment. I'd love to see more conversation about that. I'd love to see more thinking, more collaborative, to use your lovely podcast,
Yeah.
thinking about what
And-
that's like for children.
yeah, and I think a lot of educators shy away from those really, in-depth conversations because then it seems to like they think that it highlights that they're not doing their job well. And so I know that like when we even went through assessment and rating and we were looking at critically reflecting, I was wanting to make sure that we critically reflect on all 7 areas. And I think that's where a lot of services, they just want to critically reflect on and highlight things that they're doing incredibly well, rather than looking at what the purpose of a critical reflection is and going, hang on, like it's okay to need improvements. Like we've got this young staff member that's never changed a nappy before. We've got this, male staff member. How are we going to incorporate them and make sure that he can still uphold all of those like integrity and dignity of the child and in the eyes of the family? Like, so you've got all these things that you're working with, so I think it's really important that we have those discussions and that it is just a learning, and it's not to say we're not doing the right thing, but we are putting that quality improvement
Hmm.
across for our services.
Yeah, and something that you've said just reminded me is that I think there's a sensibility, especially at the moment, and all the stuff that's going on in the media around child abuse, etc., is that I think people feel very frightened. And
Mm,
I think they also feel like they have to do everything on their own.
yes.
So one of the things that I say, so I've stepped into a directing role this year, and amongst
Yeah, you said that.
and it's actually really good to be doing it because I'm challenged. I know there's areas I've got to grow, and I've got a
Yeah.
lot to share about that, which I'm looking forward to sharing my experience. But you're working with young people and listening to them and thinking about what that reciprocity looks like. But they kind of do have this thing that they have to do everything all on their own. And I'm like, but you're part of a team.
Mm,
If I
mm,
just use, the planning cycle, which is not my favorite piece of equipment, but
yeah.
people just struggle to understand it. So I use
Yeah.
a thing called notice, note, and name, and then maybe
Yeah.
nudge or next or something like that. Um,
Yeah.
and I said, if you've got 6 staff members in your room and every person writes down one thing, you've got 6 observations there.
Mm,
Got 6 noticings of something that's gone on. And how wonderful that you've then got 6 people's eyes on things,
mm,
and 6 sets of relationships and 6 sets of connections, to learn about children and learn about children's learning. So sometimes I think and I feel it too, it's easy to have that sensibility of overwhelm,
mm.
to do everything and I have to do everything perfectly rather than, um, I've got to go, why do I struggle with that bit?
Yeah.
Is it a pressure that is an external thing pushing on me, making me feel unsafe and uncomfortable? Or
Mm,
is it something that I think maybe is bigger in my own mind than it actually is? And that's, that comment could probably feel a little bit judgy, but we do that, don't we? We in the fray of things, we catastrophize.
mm.
And so what we need is in our teams, people to go, hey, that's okay, we'll sort this out. Let's
Yeah.
find another way to do it if that's not comfortable for you. And so that's where I guess the compassion and empathy
Mm,
is really critical for people at the moment in order that educators' dignity and integrity is upheld and that you are part of a team and
mm.
we're all going to get on board to support getting the work done because everyone's going to have a different strength. So why not play to your strengths?
Yeah, most definitely. Like we have done so much work around that as a service as well. And like, again, having that compassion for one another in certain times, and being okay with putting your hand up and saying, oh, I just need a moment. And like, and what would happen if you didn't have that moment? So, and that's when you see those, those burnout type of behaviors coming out in educators where they're not bringing their best self. Like I'm a big believer in not doing a 5-day working week if it doesn't work for you, because if you can't bring, like it's so much energy when you're when you're an educator that you can't possibly bring your best self 38 hours a week to the program. So if it doesn't work for you, then it's definitely something that needs to be explored to make sure that you're getting everyone's best self when they come to work to uphold that dignity of the child.
Mm.
Because when you're, um, tipping from an empty cup kind of thing, you can't expect to uh, uphold those dignities and integrity. So yeah, I think it's really important for management teams and things to be keeping an eye out. Is that person coping? What's going on? Having those really, those really good relationships so that you can have those conversations, know about what's going on in that person's life, to support them the best way you can.
It is
Yeah.
it is a complex terrain of relationships and and yeah, I agree with you. I think that it's look, there are some particular views around quality that I probably would have stuck to more firmly in the past, but now that I see the experiences people have, I think that that care and nurture for for educators is
Mm,
critical because we've had a lot of change, we've had a lot of pressure, there's been a lot of inconsistency, and people feel frightened.
mhm.
And so there's a whole lot of dysregulated nervous systems out there,
Yeah.
and that's tough to go in and try to do your best and be your best when you feel unsafe. And
Yeah.
so the relationality and the connection in those places and spaces is just as important. And as you say, 3 days a week of a really enthusiastic educator is better than 5 days of a really tired one.
Yeah. No, most definitely. So you've helped design curriculums both here and overseas. What do you think really matters the most in creating a strong framework?
What a great question. I feel so grateful to have had these experiences, particularly with the first EYLF. I mean, that was um, an incredible moment for early childhood that we were having our curriculum written into regulation and law and
Mhm,
actually having a learning framework. So, and to be in amongst that team of people, there were 36 people on that consortium. And the opportunity that I had as a young teacher, because that was 15 years ago now,
mhm.
um, and I was still teaching, I was directing a centre at the time, finishing my PhD and writing a book. How did I do that? Um, and
Sounds like every educator. Too many hats.
the lucky I like accessories. The
Yeah.
the experience of seeing people with, or Professor Linda Harrison and Professor Jennifer Sumption were really clever in choosing people with all kinds of expertise that didn't necessarily sit neatly together.
Mhm,
And that was great because it brought together this whole diverse range of expertises, if that's a word,
mhm,
and then people kind of discussed and debated which pieces of approaches and knowledge, etc., would go where.
mhm,
And to be in the richness of that discussion, I wish every single educator in the country would have had the opportunity to do that because I learned so much. I
mm,
was challenged. I was inspired. The learning was just incredible. And
mm,
I think that's what's made me a better teacher, and it's what's made me a better leader, and it's what's made me a better consultant because even if I disagree with things, I know how to engage with them and go, oh, I can see that point of view, even though it's not one that I hold.
yeah.
And I'm not going to say, I say to my team now, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I will give you my view very strongly
Mhm,
because I believe it. But at the end of the day, you're going to make the choice, your professional choice yourself. I'll give
mhm.
you my view and then you make the choice yourself because I learned how to do that in that process. So
Yeah.
then the other frameworks that I've been part of crafting have been similar
Mm,
in that how do you bring together different points of view in the best interest of children, but also, and the early years learning framework was never, it's not that it's not a curriculum for children, it's a learning framework, but it really was about raising the professional identity of educators. That was its purpose. So
mhm,
we had, like schools, a particular set of documents that nurtured, guided, and governed the way that we did things.
Mhm.
So I think the figuring out how to do that, because we all say, oh, we don't want it to be too prescriptive. We don't want to tell us what to do. Some people think it's a little bit too airy fairy because, they don't want to get it wrong. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not that they can't think or that they're not good thinkers, but the pressure to get things right can sometimes
Mm.
get in the way of actually, let me just think with this and
Mm.
own, trust myself a little bit to be a good.
Back their decisions.
Mm. So I think any framework that is going to wrap around an educational space needs to make educators feel uh, reflected.
Mhm.
It needs to make them feel professional. It needs to make them feel supported, and it needs to both guide and challenge at the same time. So
Yeah.
whether or not the EYLF does that, and other frameworks that I've done worked on have done that,
Mhm.
um, we can only ask the people who use them. But I think that would be the purpose. And also is that Lillian Katz once said that we're really good at wasting children's time. And I struggle with that a lot because I agree with her. And
Mm.
I think that sometimes our understandings of things like plays that children are just hanging around and doing stuff. But we shouldn't be afraid to inquire with children. We shouldn't be afraid to teach. And when
Mm.
I say teach, I don't mean sit babies down in front with a book and do an old fashioned, school group time, but I mean, what are young children actually capable of, and how
Mm.
are we illustrating that? How are our learning frameworks and curriculum frameworks, etc., encouraging us to go look at all these incredible things that young children can do? And
Mhm.
I'd love to see more of that going on in the profession.
Yeah, I definitely think capable, competent learners is like a really big one that we need to advocate more for because not only that, like you've got capable, competent learners, then you have also capable, competent educators. So, and just, just trial and error and, just giving it a go. I think like with you, like with the word challenging, different perspectives and things like that. I think that's a really hard thing for people to do, and it's definitely a learnt skill in when you're an adult because like once you become an adult, you just like it's my opinion and what I want to go forward should and things like that. But I think like I love having a team where I'm like, I don't want you to tell me what I want to hear. I want you to tell me your honest opinions and, challenge what I'm saying because a lot of the time I'm not in the classroom. I'm sometimes making decisions that might not fit what you're seeing in the classroom. So, challenge like my thinking on it because otherwise, like, how do we grow the early childhood sector if we're all people pleasing all the time?
That's true. And as I'm listening to you, I've had a couple of these conversations today, and it's that funny tension between, you can't not bring yourself into the classroom, but there's a point at which you've got to not bring yourself into the classroom because it's a professional space. It's not, you know, the weekend and we're all just hanging out at someone's house. There are guidelines, there are regulation and law, there is a learning framework, there are standards, there are this and all that sort of stuff. So it's that very delicate dance
Mm.
between getting the job done and being professional, being compassionate and empathic, integrity and dignity, etc., etc. So it's that, yeah, the delicate dance, I think, between how we do that stuff, because most of it, and I keep coming back to this point because it's what I'm hearing a lot recently, is that people are scared and they
Mm.
want to get it right.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
so if I take a different perspective, what if I'm wrong? What if somebody disagrees with me? So the disagreement, you and I could sit here and have a debate about a practice, lunchtime,
Mm.
whatever it is, how we do inquiry-based learning, whatever it is, what theories, philosophies, what research backs the choices that we make, etc. That's not personal.
Mm.
But sometimes, and we can all do this, if somebody disagrees with us or offers a point of view that is counter to what we have, we can actually take that quite personally. And
Yeah.
and that's tricky because we have to be compassionate and empathetic, but at the same time, page 13 of the EYLF is all about different perspectives, isn't it? And
Yeah.
at age 18, the questions in there that are all under our own critical reflection are all
Mm.
saying, well, whose worldviews and who chose them and how and why? And what if those worldviews are, discriminatory? Then
Mhm.
can we hold them? Can we use them in our practice, etc.? So I think having more open discussions, the openness and the honesty, I think that's part of our integrity. Being able to say, let's actively disagree about this and learn how to do it, or who's got different views about X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
How do you have your Vegemite on your toast?
Yeah.
Do you have a lot? Do you have a little? Do you have something? Look, here's something. It's all, I mean, that's quite benign, but
Yeah.
it illustrates that we're going to have different points of view. How do we
Mhm.
go? You've got a lot of Vegemite on your toast.
Mm.
I hope you really enjoy it. I personally wouldn't eat it like that.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to take personally that you have a lot of Vegemite and I don't.
Mm.
I'm going to go, how do I learn to understand a different point of view without taking it personally and without judging somebody else in the process?
And
And
I think it comes from having those supportive management teams that create that safe space to have those conversations. Because, I've seen it time and time again that someone really tries hard to advocate for the rights of a child, say, and it's just like not perceived well because the way that the management team and, it's with you do see it a lot in the bigger services and the services that have multiple centers, and it's just that like quality over the quantity type thing, and um, really making sure you have the right people in place. um, I was talking to Danny that I do the podcast with last night, and it's just like when you have too many chiefs and not enough cooks, that can also like it's just such a tricky balance constantly, and making sure that like it is okay to be open and honest, and have those opinions, and how is it going to be met by other educators. And I think like you do have to work really hard with those the younger educators because they don't have the life experience, and to how to respectfully and professionally have a discussion.
mm,
We recently did a critical reflection with our team, and one of the things that came up, um, it was talking about being complacent because it was around that the four corners, and we thought we'll do a reflective question around this, and what does complacency look like, and how can we make sure that we are never in that situation. And it was really interesting, like all the educators responded, and some of these educators took it really personally, and like they just on the attack sort of thing straight away. And then other ones just found ways to have digs specifically at people. So it was like a really interesting experience, to sort of go through. And we really had to then have that conversation of how do we have a professional, productive conversation? I don't want to hear about this person didn't do this and this person didn't do that. Well, why aren't they doing it? And what's the solution?
mm,
Like, it's really simple. Like, we don't need to be going around and talking to everyone about like this really simple thing that's being missed. Let's talk about a solution. So I think like having a management team that nips that sort of stuff in the bud and like doesn't let it snowball because it happens so quickly.
mm. And knowing that, as a director or a leader or a manager or, however we describe ourselves, is that we're not always going to get it right either.
No.
So that's the part where I think the perception that leaders have to be perfect. But and
Mm.
there's a beautiful speech in The West Wing, one of my favorite TV shows, and Santos, who's going to, the burgeoning new president, and he says we're asking our leaders to be perfect when we're all broken.
Yeah.
And so to be a leader is to share your vulnerabilities and to.
Mm.
I've got this really cute quote I'll read to you. This gorgeous
Yeah.
um, Rules for Mavericks, a Manifesto for Dissident Creatives by Phil Beadle. Um, and I love this quote. There's two I'll read to you. One says, if you are working in a form that necessarily involves collaboration with others, then always try to work with people who are better than you.
Mhm.
Now, that quote could be taken going, oh my God, they're better than me. But what a
Mm.
great way to say, play to your strengths.
Yeah, it almost comes back to that like five people that your closest people, making sure that they're the right people.
And then this other one, which I love, which is around creativity, because I think I get quite saddened sometimes when I see discussions on different social media, and I see the fear in a lot of early childhood educators because they are actually unbelievably creative, and I think
Mm,
a lot of that creativity gets lost.
mm,
I get very sad about that. But I'll just offer this little quote from the same book, and it says, "But you should not let the fact that you cannot play stop you from playing. Having limits to your technical abilities can force you to be supremely creative.
mm.
Creativity is, after all, merely the most elegant response possible to the limitations placed on you." And I
Yeah.
love that because whether it's technical abilities or whatever it is, the thing, but don't let it stop you from having a bit of a go. It's like you don't have to be an artist to do a drawing. You
And
know,
it's so interesting. Like, I love that quote because when I see it in my workplace and I give the educators like a task or something and they all come back and it's like, oh, we can't do it. We don't have this. We don't have that. We don't have that. And then all of a sudden the next week they're doing it. And it's like this incredible journey of like, we resourced it, we found the right people, we spoke to the community, like, and it's so cool to see them. It's like what that quote is about, like getting uncomfortable. So like you cannot go anywhere. Like you're just going to always stay at that comfort zone, unless you get outside of that and grow, because you can't grow without being uncomfortable. So yeah, no, I love that.
it's fun, isn't it? And then I've got a couple more that I'll read to you because I think they're relevant. So this is Donna Haraway. She's not an early childhood person, but she's one of my favorite writers, I suppose,
Yeah.
theorists, philosophers, don't know, but definitely a writer. And this book called Staying with the Trouble. So it is always about being in amongst the complexity. And
Mhm.
it says here, all the thousand names are too big and too small. All the stories are too big and too small. And so that's just a reminder that something that might seem like nothing to
Mhm.
me might be enormous to you.
Mhm.
And then how do I listen in a new way and bring in integrity and dignity in order to connect and relate with you in a new way where that complexity about what matters to whom and when, that's the working out that we do so that we get the best. And I'm working with these fabulous young teachers, and I'm really direct in how I ask things of them, and I always hear myself saying, "I'm doing this to make you better,
Yeah.
not for any other reason."
Yeah.
Um, and I found this little quote that I'm going to read you because I love it, which I haven't sent them yet, but I'll be sending it today. Um, it's where is it? Um, it's kind of addressing the fact that just speaking to that point. Um, let me find it now.
Mhm.
Oh, I can't find it. I'll send it through. I'll
Yeah,
have
we can put it on our page.
Here it is.
Yeah.
A star wants to see themselves rise to the top. A leader wants to see those around them become stars. And
Yeah.
so that's Simon Sinek. And
Yeah. That sounded very
heard
Simon
that
Sinek.
one before,
Yeah.
but it's just a reminder around, that how do you grow people
Hmm.
when you need to, you do need to challenge and craft and, do all these things in order that they get to be the best version of themselves as a professional,
Mm.
and that you're nurturing in a way that's compassionate and empathetic, but also bold and brave.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I always show a YouTube. It's almost the same one every time of him, and it's always about the acts of service of helping the person next to you, rather than like you say, trying to rise above and be the best. It's all about like when you're in those hard times, it's not about like it's about helping the person next to you, and again, I think this is like a skill that needs to be taught. Acts of service to your community, acts of service to friendships, relationships, all of that. It's actually like a skill that needs to be taught. It's not, particularly in this day and age with, again, technology and things like that. they're not giving, they're just receiving constantly. So, how do we teach our children to give more? And I said this in my last podcast, but like with Michelle Mitchell, I loved her quote when I went and saw her last time, and it was stop asking your children what they want to be when they grow up and start asking them what do they have to give. And I was just like, oh, that's so impactful because we are constantly just putting expectations rather than just let's bring it back to being simple and being there for each other, connecting, nurturing, loving. So,
And
yeah.
having that, the connection, and this is where I was talking this morning about anti-bias approaches. I'm just gonna get my national quality framework that is in the bag.
Yeah, nice.
And in it, I've got some books. And so, talking about that, exactly what you're talking about links directly to the
Mhm.
anti-bias approach in early childhood, and
Yeah.
also to FAIR's FAIR, which is here. And this is kind of the very practical application of the work in here, although this does have beautiful practice examples and some really good reflective questions in it as well.
Yeah.
And so these two books are not separate from Becoming, Being, Belonging. So that
Mm.
whole thing around connection and people feeling strong and people feeling good about themselves, in FAIR's FAIR, the first thing we talk about, Lisa Bryant and I, the first thing we talk about is if you don't feel good about yourself, you're not going to learn. So
Mhm.
this is where sometimes I worry that we think that the anti-bias and inclusion stuff is all about feeling good and
Mhm.
that wonderful and celebrating diversity, which is fabulous, but it is
Yeah.
actually with a view to, it's an education system we're in,
Mhm.
not just a feel-good system, it's actually an
Mhm.
education system. So the
Yeah.
reason that we want children to feel good about themselves is so that they can learn,
Mhm.
because they are going to school and they are
Yeah.
part of a society and they do need to have skills and et cetera, et cetera. But education always happens in a social context.
Mm.
So the relationship between the anti-bias goals, and the EYLF is that if you look at the outcomes, they're
Mhm.
almost identically the same as the anti-bias goals. So anti-bias isn't one of those approaches that you can kind of pick and choose. It's
Yeah.
embedded within the EYLF, and
Mhm.
it's embedded within the National Quality Standard and regulation and law, because it's a rights-based framework. So it's not one of those ones where you go, that's my philosophy and we will
Mm.
privilege that. It's actually something that we're all compelled to be
Yeah.
working on. And
Mhm.
again, people can feel scared about it, which is why Lisa came up with the brilliant idea of doing
Mhm.
this book that gives you what is it? Why is it important? How do you do it? What should you do?
Mhm.
What should you not do?
And
Um,
the misconceptions that are out there.
correct.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think that sort of stuff is, yeah, I think we get a bit scared of using resources like that, but I want to advocate for good old fashioned books there
Back
to
to
help
basics.
you and support you and
Yeah.
resource you. We do have them online, but yes, the content of them is there not to baffle you, but to help you and support you.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
I just want to finish off with so with the Elf Play book version 2
Oh yes.
being such a valuable resource. I just wanted to, ask what inspired you and Anthony Saman, and how do you hope that it supports educators in their everyday practice?
Well, here it is. Speaking of the devil, um, or the angel, I should say. So
Yeah.
Anthony, in fact, we were sitting right here at this table. Anthony and I were working on another project together, and the this version of the EYLF had literally just popped up, and our inboxes just exploded. Phones went off. Can you help us? What do we do? Oh my gosh, new EYLF. What's la 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 la. And we both looked at each other and I said, let's do this. Let's do some webinars. Let's reassure some people. Let's go through it, learn about it together. And the webinars were just they were wonderful. We actually feel really grateful for that project, because we got the opportunity to speak to so many there were thousands and thousands
Mm,
of educators who came to those webinars, and really good discussion. We learned a lot. We got to deliver and try to reassure people. And once the webinars had been done, people were like, "Oh, we want to keep thinking about this." So we put them together in the book, but the book is put together in such a way that there is, here's what the changes are. Go directly to a sequel for those because
Yeah,
that's the right place to go. And
definitely.
we've been really clear about that in here. But then we've also created spaces, planning for thinking, for example. So
Hmm.
it's kind of, we wanted to create a resource that danced with the EYLF, that helped people do their thinking together
Hmm.
and just a little bit at a time. So
Yeah.
small and achievable pieces.
Well, it's like the quality improvement plan. You can't possibly do it all at once. You need to be focusing on, one area to do it correctly, like
Yeah, yeah. And I
more
mean,
intentionally.
yeah, look, I'm a pretty confident um teacher, and I love the early years learning framework. I mean, I can critique it, I can do all those things as well, but
Yeah.
generally I'm really glad that it's our learning framework, and there's so much
Yeah.
to do really wonderful creative things. And so I feel like, all of the work that I do will always come back to that
Mm.
because it is so magical in so many ways. And I would really love a really confident profession. And even
Mhm.
on page 4 of the EYLF, you can tell what my social life is, memorize. Um, the goals down the bottom here, just to where we started, bring us back round. Goal number 2, this is what your job is, right? All young Australians become confident and creative individuals. What a
Mm.
wonderful, menacem job we have there. To be successful lifelong learners, active and informed members of a community. What a beautiful
It
calling.
sums up what we've just been talking about.
Isn't that gorgeous?
Yeah,
And
and like, how do you? Yeah, and this is where we're at, right? It's like informing educators that they do this really special job. So let's get excited about it.
yeah, and feel reassured, that's what we're doing. We're doing it together. We're not doing this on our own. And
Yeah,
it's wonderful to be needy. I say be as needy as possible. Let's need each other. Let's,
yeah.
lean into each other and really enjoy the collaboration of learning, enjoy the creativity of thinking and being a creative person. And yes, as I said, to nurture in as many ways as possible so that people do feel confident
Mm.
in their roles. That would make me very, very happy.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the collaborative approach in education. We feel so fortunate that you've donated your time today to get the word out and to, keep the progression and growth going in our sector. So I really am thankful for that.
My pleasure. And, as I said in the beginning, I love that you're doing this. You're running a service, you're reaching out, connecting. This is what it's all for. This is what we're all made of, right? And so anything to support you in your work, I'm always available and happy to do that. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, leave it there, I guess.
Awesome. That bit off.
Yep. Cut that off. Yeah. No.
All right. So
Thank you so much.
I did hit record, didn't I? Yes. Phew.
Mhm. Yeah, I heard it say it recorded.
Recording in progress. I will I'll email that to you right now.
Yeah,
So
cool.
that,
Thank you so much for that. It was
yeah,
like a hectic time.
I'll do it on WeTransfer.
Okay.
But can you just confirm that you've got it so that I'll hang on to it until you've confirmed that you've got the all the recordings. And then
Mhm.
if you don't, Maria can help you out on Tuesday.
Okay, cool. Sounds good.
Hey,
Thanks so much.
have a beautiful day. I forgot to do my love hearts.
Yeah, I love
I'm
that.
a huge fan of them.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
You too. Bye 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 bye.
Bye.